Now, tonight's esteemed speaker only said yes when I asked her because she said, I'll do it if you sit by me. My function is to let her enchant you, and I keep her tight on a budget of time. So, we're a room full of friends, and she's a star. Let's give Elizabeth WICHMANN WALCZAK.
The question here is, how did a Midwestern haole girl end up creating jingju in Hawaii, right?
Good question.
Okay, all right. So I was born in Kansas, like Dorothy, in 1951, but I did grow up speaking two languages. English and Spanish, and the Spanish was because my father was teaching at the University of Wichita. It's now Wichita State, but he was trying to organize migrant workers into unions, which was, rather touchy in Wichita, especially then.
McCarthy.
Yeah. So one of my earliest memories is of a Ku Klux Klan cross burning in the front yard. Yeah.
You were pigeon-toed.
Right. Exactly. I was born very pigeon-toed, and my mother was told I would have to wear braces on my legs, and she was determined that I would not do this, and she didn't have any training in this, so I didn't know how, but she invented some exercises on her own. The one that I remember the most is the two ends of the living room. Each end she had a bowl of marbles. And I would walk up to one bowl of, I'm very small at this time, at the most two, and walk up to one bowl of marbles and pick up marbles in the toes of one foot, and then walk to the other end and put those marbles down, and then pick up some more in the other foot and walk to the other end, and keep this up until she would say, okay, that's enough. I think she had other ones too, but that's the one I remember. The other thing she had me do was take ballet lessons, and this is from age 2 or so. And my father said that I was born performing, and one of the reasons that he said this was my first ballet performance. So I was less than 3, and I was, of course, one of the Sugar Plum fairies, little fairies in the Nutcracker. And we'd had a dress rehearsal, and that was fine. But the performance, I went out with all the little Sugar Plum fairies, and it was great, but there were people there. And I saw all those people, and I just went down to stage center and just stood there looking at all the people. They had to drag me off stage, right? Yeah. But they were laughing, so it wasn't bad. The other story that goes with this. Thank you,
why don't
Jeff.
you tell us?
Yes, thank you. Yes. Visiting grandparents, wintertime, driving across the Missouri Ozarks from Kansas to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and the snowed in restaurant, little restaurant. People are very depressed, Christmas Eve, stuck in the restaurant. My father says, you need to entertain these people, you need to make them happy. I'm going to put you up on this table, you're going to sing and dance. So I did. And everybody got much happier in the little restaurant. So yes, born to perform. So the point of all of this is that from a very young age, I had the idea that I liked to perform, and the point of performing was to make things better. We perform to make things better.
Your father found a way out of the Midwest.
My father was hired to be the mediator between the government of Burma, it's now Myanmar, but then it was the Union of Burma, and the United States, because the U.S. government wanted to pave the road from Rangoon, now Yangon, to Mandalay. And the Burmese government would prefer that it not be paved because the primary traffic was bullock cart, and the feet of bullocks do not really like paved roads, yeah? So he was hired, and the family went to Burma, and I was made a member of the Rangoon Municipal Ballet Company, and I danced every group role in the Nutcracker. But the Posehn family had a class in Burmese dance, Zat Poi dance, for the children of foreigners. So my mother signed me up for it immediately. And the teacher was Amy Posehn. The Posehn was like It's like the Redgrave family in England, a major family in Zat Pui. And Amy was the daughter of Po Sein, the head of this family. So it was an amazing thing to have a class from her. And she saw that I had basic skills from all of those. By then, I was 8, so I'd had a number of years of ballet. So she let me take classes with children who were being trained to actually be professionals. And that meant that, as would happen with the hula halal, I got to be in professional public performances as one of a group of the equivalent of Sugar Plum Fairies. And what happened was that I just fell in love with presentational performance that asks the performer to not only act, but also dance and sing and do things that are stylized and learn conventions so that you could communicate in different ways. I just fell in love with it.
Let's jump.
Okay. My first year in high school, they were doing the play Rumpelstiltskin. I wasn't really interested in auditioning for the queen or the princess, so I auditioned for the role of Rumpelstiltskin because I figured I could use Burmese dance, right, for Rumpelstiltskin. And I'd had also some of the voice work of Zat Pui, so I had vocal registers that were, different than probably people had if they'd just been in Iowa. So I got the role of Rumpelstiltskin. And I just loved it. I was painted green and I had a green wig and I used Burmese dance and I used various vocal registers and it was quite marvelous. Had a good time. Jump again. I'm at college in Iowa, majoring in theater, and at that time you could exam out required courses. So I had lots of electives. So I was able to take things like East Asian history and Chinese literature and translation. And at the end of the course of Chinese literature and translation, I told the teacher, who was a TA from Portuguese Macau, just how much I loved the material, especially some of the early poetry that we'd read. But he said, well, you have no right to like it. You can't even read it in the original. I was 18 years old and I took that as a dare, so okay. The next semester I signed up for Mandarin Chinese. That's a
natural.
Took other classes to go along with it, including classes from Professor Cheng Shi, who taught us Chinese dramatic literature and translation. And he talked about how this indeed was total theater, how these actors, even more so than the actors of the Zat Pui, did song and dance and acrobatics and all sorts of things in their performance. I got excited. I ended up having 2 BAs, the one in theater and the other one in what they called Chinese language and civilization, which is a little grandiose. And then there was a letter that came to pretty much every Asian studies department and theater department in the U.S. mainland, where these two both existed at the same university campus. And it was from James R. Brandon inviting applications for the first Asian Theater Research Assistantship at the University of Hawaii. And I thought, well, this seems to be made for me. And I wrote an application and I got it. So I came to Hawaii. But then, of course, the way things work with government, the position hadn't been released yet.
The money.
So I ended up, for my first 2 years in Hawaii, working in the scene shop as the property mistress. Actually, that too was a good thing. I learned a whole lot about technical theater that I would never have learned otherwise, because I don't think I would have taken those courses.
Now, Brandon was gone.
So that first year, Jim Brandon was on sabbatical, and Daniel Young was here directing Black Dragon Residence. And I was the assistant director, and that was very exciting. I quite enjoyed it. I learned a lot. We went on tour to the neighbor islands, which all Asian theater productions did then. And the leading lady got sick. just like in the movies. And the assistant director, had to step in. In 12 hours, I had 12 hours to, try to rehearse it with the leading man and work on the lines and the pirates and the water sleeves and everything. And I'd seen it, but I'd never done it. So the first time it was great, the first island. The second island, it was great. The final island, as we're doing the final big movement sequence, he comes around, the leading man, and his water sleeves whapped. Out go my contact lenses. I lose my balance. The final movement is completely distorted. He kind of catches me before I fall, and we managed to end it with the final pose. But the director is furious with me because I destroyed the final moment of the last performance of his play. So I didn't get that final moment as the heroine who stepped in and saved the day. I know. Oh! But then Jim Brandon came back, and I had the incredible experience of several years of kabuki every year, culminating with Chushingura, the 47 samurai, the Ronin. And this was taught by Nakamura Matagoro from Japan, from the National Theater of Japan, an incredible actor and teacher, and two of his disciples. And one of those was Matashiro. Matashiro taught the Onagata, the female roles, and that's the role I was playing. But it was a really difficult situation because Matashiro had learned at the National Theater. He was not from a kabuki family, so he would never be able to professionally play the role he had to teach me. And it became more and more difficult for him as time went by. And this culminated in a big dress rehearsal in costume, and we're all on the stage. And he's sitting here, and Junko Berberich is sitting beside him, a fellow graduate student, having to translate for him. And other teachers, etc., are sitting in the audience, and he just lit into me. Everything about me horrible things about me as a person, as a performer. He went on for 10 or 15 minutes, and poor Junko had to translate all of this, and I'm sitting there just trying to just hold it all together. Then finally he said, all right, do the scene. Okay, we did the scene. It's a very emotional scene, and I cried real tears. I managed not to sob, thank goodness. Cried real tears. I guess this made a difference for him. Probably people talked to him, but he didn't do this to me again. And when I talked to Jim Brandon, Dr. Brandon, about this afterwards, he praised my endurance, and he praised the way in which I had honored the teacher by staying silent and taking that all in and then going on. This turned out also to be an extraordinary learning experience because I was able to take this with me into future situations which were difficult and in which I needed to honor the teacher. So I'm thankful in retrospect. I was not that day.
Painful hair. Hair.
Oh, hair? It's a very heavy wig, especially for that character, and the inside of a kabuki wig is metal, and it's very tight on your head, yeah, and then it has, it may have a lot of hair and a lot of ornaments and be quite heavy. So learning to wear this and then being able to forget about it is an achievement that also becomes useful later. So the other thing I did during this period of time, of course, was put together a dissertation proposal. Mm-hmm. At that time in China, the only plays being done were model, revolutionary, modern or contemporary jingju, Beijing Opera plays. Now, when I told Jeff this, he said, "Oh,
propaganda."
Exactly. I said, "Jeff." Okay. These plays were created under extraordinary circumstances by the finest artists in the country. These were artists who had as much time as they needed as much funding as necessary, who could call for other artists, any other artists they needed, to create, to take traditional stylizations and conventions and artistic forms and use them to create modern stories. Now, these stories were about revolutionary circumstances, yeah? So in that sense, they are propaganda. The way, I said to Jeff, the film Casablanca was propaganda, yeah? Yes. So I don't want you to dismiss them. And my proposal was a study of the aesthetics of these model revolutionary modern jingju plays, which are extraordinary from the artistic point of view. When you're a graduate theater student, you study about experimental theater. It's always Euro-American. Now, the biggest theater experiment in the world was the model revolutionary modern jingju, the creation of those. The most time, the most money, the most et cetera, the most everything possible. Yeah, you can't beat it. All right, anyway.
You're ready to go for 4 years. There's no money.
Yes.
Nothing going on. Can't go into China. China's closed places to the Western
Yes, so I had
academics get out.
While I was not going to China, I had the opportunity to teach at Windward Community College, at OCCC, and I had the opportunity to create theater at those places and to work with at-risk kids who created plays, and these plays toured to high schools. So lots of really useful theatrical experience.
Prison show, Dracula.
Oh yes, the Dracula show was created by the PAHAL, the prisoners at OCCC, and it was set at the time of contact, using the Dracula theme, and you can sort of imagine, right? How that story might have gone.
I want to hear that.
That was exciting.
She's going to China.
So, restoration of relations occurred. And 30-some American scholars and graduate students were selected to go to China. I was the token arts person. I was very lucky to be chosen, and I had help tweaking my dissertation proposal so it sounded more like social sciences than it actually was. And then I got there, and I had serious culture shock. My culture shock was because it wasn't communist. I expected it to be communist. And that was kind of foolish of me because communism is an ideal. And although, I mean, the propaganda said that the ideal had been reached, but I shouldn't probably have believed that. We certainly haven't reached the ideal of democracy. Okay, so all these 30-some Americans in Beijing were terrified, so they sent as many of us off to different places as they possibly could. And I was sent to Nanjing, which sort of disturbed me at the time because I was studying Beijing theater. But I got to Nanjing, and so I had my dissertation proposal in Chinese and handed it to the foreign office of the university. Every place foreigners could go in China at that time had a foreign office. If it didn't have a foreign office, you couldn't go. So the foreign officer read it and looked at me and said, "There's no such thing as revolutionary model modern jingju. And this concept isn't even scientific." That was rather a blow. They had been banned, of course, at the end of the Cultural Revolution, but this hadn't kind of reached us as news. So they did not exist at all. And what was happening instead was the reviving and the teaching of the traditional.
It took me a while to get that. And Elizabeth is dropped down in the middle of this.
Exactly. So I had to figure out what to do. So I spent 2 days in line at the telephone and telegraph office in order to call Jim Brandon, my advisor back in Hawaii. It was hard to make a long distance call in those days. And he said, "Look, you're there, I'm here. You figure out what's the best thing to do. Write yourself a new proposal and do it. I trust you, I believe in you." And this was great. He was treating me like a colleague instead of a student, and it was really necessary too, because that was really all that could be done. And so I thought about it, and almost everything I'd read in English at that point was about what it looked like. Costumes, makeup, movement. Nothing about what it sounded like, about voice, about song, about the orchestra. So I decided, okay, I will research the oral dimension of jingju. So that was my new proposal. I wrote it, I translated it to Chinese, I had it ready, and I had an advisor at Nanjing University, WICHMANN WALCZAK. She had been on the Long March. She was writing her own dissertation, also in theater, but in spoken drama, not traditional Chinese theater. Her perspective from theater, she understood that most Western languages use tones to express emotion. So as soon as people who speak Western languages start trying to speak Chinese, where the tones indicate meaning, they destroy the tones, the meaning's lost, it's a disaster. So she wanted me to learn how to express emotion properly in Chinese before I started on my research. I couldn't do it anyway because I didn't have access to theater companies or theater schools to observe because they didn't have foreign offices.
How'd she get you to do that?
Well, what she did was she had me memorize children's stories. Things like 东国先生和狼, which is Mr. Dongguo and the wolf. Yeah? And it worked. It was very, very useful because you stress the Chinese tone. You don't change it. And then, of course, once you're into jingju, you use various patterns of stylization when you stress it, but that's a little later in the story. Now we do this. So the president of the university held a tea party for his foreign students. At that point he had maybe a dozen. And each of us was supposed to do a little performance at this tea party. So most people sang their national anthem or something, but at the University of Hawaii, a professor of Thai language who was Chinese had a Friday evening sort of dinner party club where he taught us to sing kunchu. And I had attended that when I wasn't in rehearsals, and I could sing various passages of kunchu, which is a classical Chinese theater form. So I sang that at this tea party, and he took me aside. He was enthralled that this little foreigner could sing classical Chinese theater. And he asked me, how could he help me? And I said, well, and I took out my translated proposal. I said, I need to go to theater companies and observe rehearsals and observe 基本功, which is basic skills, the practice of basic skills. And I need to go to theater schools and observe the teaching. And I need to learn performance myself. These are my methodologies, and I can't get to these places. And he said, well, I can get you to those places. But what I'd like you to do for me, I want to pick your teacher for your learning of performance, and I want to pick the play, and then I want you to perform it for me. And imagining a tea party, like that tea party, I said, that'd be great.
To be continued.
To be continued, yes. But then he just opened, it's called open the back door. 他给我开后门. He opened the back door for me, and within a week, I was observing any time of the day. And that really, early in the morning, because early in the morning is when the practicing of basic exercises, basic skills happen. My first astounding discovery, which kind of changed the world. Okay, so I was watching them at like table talk, early rehearsals. They were doing line readings. I understand line readings, right? They were doing line readings, and it'd be a little different this way and a little different that way, trying out how you want to do it. But they were also singing, and I thought, well, they must have, had the book before and memorized the singing ahead of time, because that's how I was used to singing. And then, by the second day, the third day, I was realized, well, they're singing it differently each time, just like the line readings are different each time. And I finally realized the singing is different each time, just like the line readings. They're interpreting the singing just like they're interpreting the speaking. These actors have the most incredible amount of creative authority. I was just astonished. And the composer then, in this instance, his job was to sort of collect all of this. And the director, because they were using this musical language of jingju, and some of the parts of it, right, would be at a slower tempo, and some would be at a faster tempo. And if one actor was always using this slower tempo, and it really was not probably appropriate as emotional expression, the director would say, well, you really can't keep using this mamban all the time. I'm going to have you use some arleo here, yeah? So the director would be working with the musical language also. It was absolutely fascinating. I was astounded and astonished, and I'd never had any idea of any of this before. So this access for observation was just the most eye-opening, life-changing thing for me. They would have a rest period after lunch, but these young actors, they didn't rest. They would get together and they would play mahjong, but they couldn't bet, because that wasn't done in socialist China. So what would happen if you lost, you took a little strip of paper and stuck it on your face. So I would be there, I would be observing, because they would be talking shop. And so I would learn all these kinds of things over these mahjong games that were completely different from observing. But I would, of course, lose, because you can't concentrate on mahjong. Your job is listening. So by the end of the hour and a half, I would just be covered with strips of paper. I wish I had a picture of that, but I don't. But the other thing was the amazing welcome. I wasn't allowed to eat at the jingju company because I was told that the conditions were lacking. So I had to go back to the university. Well, it's across town. This is a big city. This is Nanjing, one of the largest cities in China. It's across town. So I would bike over for the morning exercises, bike back for breakfast, bike back for the morning rehearsal, bike back for lunch, bike back for the afternoon, bike back for dinner, and if there's something going in the evening, bike back for that, and then bike back at the end of the day. They were worried about me getting home at night, so I had this astounding 8 to 10 man bicycle escort every night in the dark. It was the safest place I'd ever been in my life, but they wanted to make sure I was safe. So amazing welcome, but I was getting thinner and thinner. I really was. And the mother-in-law of the guy who was playing the lead in the play I was observing the rehearsals of, she noticed this and she told him, you bring her home for lunch. This was a huge thing to do. First of all, I was not allowed to be there. That meant nobody was allowed to have me there. Everyone had tickets, coupons for rice, for oil, for all these things you eat. If they invited me, they would have to use their own on me. They would be losing things to eat. And there are just all sorts of reasons. Self-deprivation and actually risk-taking for not inviting me there. But she just invited me. And so I didn't know all this, so I started going. And my advisor, she got me those coupons so I could at least contribute coupons. Later, actually a number of years later, when I was talking to this mother-in-law, when I asked her, why did you take that risk? That was a huge risk. You know, just a few years before that, listening to Voice of America made you a traitor. I mean, that was a really risky thing you did. And she said, well, I wasn't thinking about all of that because when I was a little girl, the Nanjing Massacre happened. And I observed Chinese people helping Chinese people, and I observed Chinese people not helping Chinese people. And I decided in my life, if anybody ever needed help, I was going to help them. And you were getting thinner and thinner. You needed help. So I helped you. None of those other things mattered to me.
Isn't that beautiful? What a courageous thing to do.
Yeah. So that family is still my family. Yeah.
Let's give a hand to that woman.
Yeah. So then the performance training that I had with Madame Shen Xiaomei, she was chosen, right, by the university president to teach me a play. She's the youngest disciple of Mei Lanfang. Mei Lanfang, the most famous Chinese actor of the 20th century, certainly the finest jingju, so-called Beijing Opera actor of the 20th century, and probably the finest Chinese actor. It's amazing. Everybody was telling me how great he was. And so okay, I'm going to compare what he does to what my teacher does. You know, I'm an American. Nobody's that great, right? So, you know, I wasn't conscious of it. I just never wrote anything down. I was just watching. I just fell into what he was doing. It just came out of the ground. It was scratchy film and just remarkable.
They buried it so that it wouldn't be confiscated or ruined.
Remarkable. This is one of the main reasons why I was so lucky I was not kept in Beijing and got sent to Nanjing, because I would never have gotten this kind of opportunity in Beijing. There are too many important people. The play that he wanted to teach me, the way I'm translating it's 贵妃醉酒 in Chinese, and the way I'm going to translate it is the favorite concubine drowns her sorrows. And the story, just to be brief, is that she is from a poor family. She's been selected to be an imperial concubine. And at the moment, she's a favorite imperial concubine. And the emperor has made a date with her to spend the evening and the night, have dinner at a particular pavilion. So she goes there, and then she receives word that, oh no, he's going to go visit another concubine and spend the night with her in another pavilion. So she's there with her 8 female attendants and the 2 eunuch attendants. So she has face to save with them and with herself. I mean, her whole fate, right, is completely in the hand of the emperor. If he chooses never to see her again, she has no control over what happens to her or her family, who are entirely dependent on her. And there's really nothing she can do about it. So she goes ahead with the feast, but she tends to have more of the wines of the feast than the food of the feast. So her feelings become more and more evident. You know, they're hidden at the beginning, but they become more and more evident. It's a very complicated piece, physically and emotionally. So it's really probably not what one would choose to teach as the first piece you learn in a new theater form. But that's what he chose. So that's what she had to teach me. And she would normally teach a play to someone who was 10 to 13 years old. So there I am, a foreigner, not too much background in Chinese culture, 28 years old, with very shaky Chinese language at that point. And she has to teach me this play. Oh, and I have no background in jingju performance except for that little episode with Black Dragon residents. Our first class, she starts demonstrating for me, teaching me in the absolutely traditional way, which is to talk and move or sing and move simultaneously, and I'm supposed to imitate. And I try to imitate, but I stop her after a short time and say, excuse me, I have to write this down or I won't be able to remember it. And I sit down and write. She's just astonished. And then, okay. And she starts again and she does a little bit. Oh, sorry, Sarah, I didn't need to write it down. So at the end of our time together, she's, done a bit of this, and I think she's just absolutely appalled. And she's polite when she leaves. But I take my notes and I really work on it while she's gone, you know, until our next lesson. And so when we have the next lesson, she says, okay, show me what you remember. I remember everything I wrote down, which is, I can go through the whole thing. I can follow the music. She's astonished because the kids that she taught could never do that, right? She would have to go through it with them again and over it with again that number of times. And she didn't have to do that with me. So after several sessions, she decided what she came to call this adult way of learning was pretty good. And then she began slightly changing how she taught. So it was attuned to this. And she would actually slightly separate, you know. She realized that I probably learned faster if the speech and song were taught separately from the movement and then put together, that I got it faster. She figured this out. Okay, so we had about 3 months, but there were gaps in that 3 months, so we didn't get to, and about 2 times a week classes. So I don't know, altogether probably 6 weeks of classes, 2 times a week, and then I had to perform. That's pretty short, okay? So we have a dress rehearsal, and there are the 8 attendants who are professional students at the theater school about to graduate, and the 2 eunuchs, ditto. And hair is tied on piece by piece, the eyebrows are tied up, it's very tight. I was the only one who didn't throw up or faint because of my experience with Black Dragon Residence and all those kabuki wigs, right? All those kabuki wigs. But then they start putting this character's costume on me. Every layer has its own set of water sleeves. I had never practiced with all those water sleeves. There are about 5 separate water sleeves that you have to somehow make stay together when you're doing these things. The water sleeves are lengths of white silk that are on the ends of your costume, and you toss them and you pick them up. And if there's just one, maybe you can control it with your fingers. But there I am, suddenly there was another one inside and another one inside that and another one inside that, and you got to flip them all and pick them all up. And anyway, it was rather cumbersome. I was rather surprised. Start going out, pick them up, open my fan, look out from behind my fan and start singing. And it gets slower and slower. Finally it stops. And the conductor, who's the guy who's playing the drum and using the Shanika Jawama, are you following me? Yes. Oh. He'd never experienced that before. Because, and this I didn't know until that moment, in
the dress
jingju,
rehearsal,
the orchestra follows the actor. Well, I did not know how to lead an orchestra as an actor, and I didn't know how to learn how to do that in a day. My teacher talked with the conductor, and mostly they, but a little bit I. So I learned a little bit about how to do that, and the conductor learned a whole lot about how to follow an actor. And we managed to get to the point where we could then perform this thing with the actor and the orchestra being together and the tempo being about what it should be. But it was an amazing reach for me and an extraordinary reach for this professional who had never done that in his life. So there were 2 performances of this, one at the exhibition stage of the theater school, and then at the huge theater, Soviet-style theater at Nanjing University. And the audience for both of these came in black cars with little flags waving on all 4 corners of the cars. And there was a very large media presence. My parents in Pennsylvania were called by Reuters in the middle of the night. It was extraordinary. In the press, I did an astonishing performance. I was brilliant. And I had blonde hair and blue eyes. So all of that was about equally true. With that short period of training, I had all the words correctly, I had the basic movements correctly, I remembered everything, I was where I needed to be, when I needed to be there, and everything was basically Mei Lang Fang style, the basic outline of Mei Lang Fang style, because my teacher really worked on that. So that's what I did. Brilliant! It was the first time that a Westerner had performed jingju since before liberation, before 1949. So it was a big deal. It was also a big deal because China was just starting to open up. So I became incredibly famous. And I don't know how to explain this. Articles in magazines, pictures of me on their covers. And this is like Life, Look, Time, obviously newspapers, front pages, newsreels at movie theaters, documentaries. I got letters from all over China and all over the parts of the world that Chinese media reached the most thoroughly. So parts of Africa, from Iran, actually. I got marriage proposals. I saved this many marriage proposals. It was extraordinary. I was recognized on the street wherever I went in China. And I find this very strange because they worked out, this marvelous woman worked out a makeup for me because you couldn't put the correct makeup of a jingju dan, young female character. It would look terrible. So she redesigned it so that my face looked pretty much like what it was supposed to look like, in spite of the fact that I'm constructed like this. This is called a tall nose, 高鼻子. So in real life, I really don't look very much like what I looked like with that makeup on, but people recognized me everywhere. 4 years later, when I was there with Sandy Finney, getting ready for the first jingju production, first thing we did, we walked into a shop because she needed to buy something, and the shopkeeper bought out a magazine that had me on the cover and asked me to sign it. Somewhat shocking for her. Famous people wanted to know me. You know, actors and directors and writers who I would really like to interview. Easy. They wanted to meet me. I mean, there was none of this business of how do I get access. And right up to the present day, I can get access to companies and archives and libraries that other people have to pay for access. I have never paid for access for anything. I had this joke with my husband that was, because I'm the famous Wei Li Sha, that's my name in Chinese, but it really is because I'm the famous Wei Li Sha. However, the university president had an agenda. In all of his publicity about this, he referred to the Nanjing University Kunqu and Jingju troupe, that I was part of this troupe. Of course, I wasn't one. And then he expected, actually what it was, that previously he had asked the Jiangsu Department of Culture for such a troupe, and they told him no. So he believed that if there was this huge amount of national and international publicity about this troupe, they would have to give it to him. But Jiangsu province is extremely conservative. And so they just said, when he asked them again, after all of this publicity, they just said again, no. But they also wrote me a letter. I took this personally, and it took me a long time to not take it personally, but it wasn't actually to me at all, it was to him. But it said, Wei Li Sha, you did a great job working with our jingju company and our theater school, and we're really happy about it and proud of you. But we think now, for your second year of research, you should stay at Nanjing University and work with the jingju and kunshu troupe there instead of with our company and school. And what this constituted was a ban. I could not go to those places anymore. Those people were banned from working with me anymore. So it was just shut down. I was just devastated. I thought I'd just done well. I had just worked really hard. I hadn't expected to have to do this huge thing. I thought it was going to be a tea party. But Shen Xiaomei, my teacher, said, never mind, come to my house. I'll just keep teaching you at my house. And more than that, people from the Jingju company, and these are all people my age, came to me and said, look, let's meet at Purple Mountain Park. Purple Mountain Park is this huge thing in Nanjing, and at the time it was wild and woolly. It wasn't kept up at all. So you could find sections of it. Nobody would ever know you were there. And I had this, the characteristic movement for the different role categories and audio and all sorts of things. They were taking an enormous risk. I'm not sure I entirely understood how enormous, but I knew that it was a big risk. They insisted on doing it. They liked me, but it wasn't just because they liked me. What was happening was that already the central government was telling the country that isn't it a shame that our old traditional theater is just too slow, that young people don't like it, that nobody's going to the theater anymore. This wasn't true. At the time this started, there were huge lines to get in. People were fascinated by this traditional theater that was coming back. But this publicity was just coming and coming and coming. And my friends thought that by doing this, by getting people outside of the country to care for jingju, it might change this. And I do wish it had. It didn't. It didn't. But jingju's still there, rolling along as best it can. But those people too are definitely best friends for life.
For 1981.
Okay, yeah. So then I come to the University of Hawaii. And what I really want to do is to produce jingju training programs and English language productions of major plays so that I can create meaningful cross-cultural sharing through artistic immersion for both the teachers and the students. My life experience suggested to me that that was an excellent way to foster cross-cultural compassion. And it seems to me that cross-cultural compassion is what you need first if you're ever going to have cross-cultural understanding. I think that compassion has to be there first, and you get it through those kinds of things that happened to me.
Big idea.
Okay. Just really briefly, these training programs.
Yes, tell us about it.
6 to 7 months of immersion. The teachers come for the fall semester of training, and then the rehearsals and the performance are in the spring. The structure of the training program it's structured around the 4 skills of jingju: song, speech, dance acting, which is acting in the Western sense, and then everything that's involved in expressive movement except acrobatics and combat, which are the 4th skill. Okay. First of all, before the teachers come, I teach a semester of just basic physical skills for dance acting and a tiny bit of combat. But also, I teach protocol, how you interact with the teachers in and outside of class, so that those students who take that class then can sort of seed the training program, and everyone will learn that faster. Then in the fall, 3 teachers come from China. 2 who teach the actors, 1 teaches female roles and one teaches male roles, and then one teaches musicians. And then for the actors, there are 2 regular classes that go all semester long, 1 voice, 1 movement. Yeah, that separation that simplifies it for us coming out of Western acting training. In music, also 2 classes, 1 melodic and 1 percussion, and some people do both. Then at the end of the second week, for the actors, auditions. Quickly have auditions. Got to get them cast. I told the teachers who had never had auditions, right, because they come up through training and they get assigned to the troupe and they all know each other and they never audition. That's why I said, well, auditions are people come and they can do this or this or this or this or this or this or this. Fine, let's do that.
All of it.
All of it. So I tried to make it as much like a party as possible. And then the teachers would cast, and what they were looking for were the role categories of jingju. Who can be an older male? Who can be a younger male? These are very different. They have different vocal qualities, different physical qualities. Same for older female, younger female. And then they think about character. So I rarely participated in the casting. I would sometimes go, wow, I hadn't thought of that. And often they double cast. So that a pair of people would play a major role and a minor role and switch. What is traditional is to have different people play the same character in different parts of the play. So then the teachers would meet during the day. In addition, right, to those 2 regular classes you're going, somebody, the assistant director, not me, had to make a schedule for the teachers to meet with these actors throughout the day. So people playing this character need 3 times a week, people playing that one need 4 times a week, people playing this one need 2 times a week. Make out a schedule. The teacher has to have all those classes. So the teachers have all those classes, the students have quite a few, and then by about October, add evening classes where the people in a particular scene come together. That includes both teachers and the students in that scene, and probably the teacher of the musicians, so he can,
accompany.
Yeah. So by then, you see the teachers are teaching all day long into the night, 5 days a week. So you can really see how what the teachers are doing is they're sort of missionaries of jingju.
Yeah.
They really are. And then just before Christmas break, try to bring in the lead melodic instruments and percussion instruments and try to work those in.
So there's a rough go through just before Christmas, where they throw them all together and they mush through it.
No, not all the instruments.
Oh.
No, just the lead ones. And then the break, and I think that break is really important. So you're not even thinking about it, but it's going on in the back of your mind. It just cooks. Got to have that break. Thank goodness it's scheduled in.
Right.
And then you come back, and then that's when you add the whole orchestra with everyone there. And the big change there is that I become the director, and the teachers then are working with the students as sort of their acting coaches, individually, all of them. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say about this process is that in the rehearsal process, we get in that hair and costume as early as possible so that people have calluses on their heads and are totally used to those costumes before they ever have an audience. I want to talk about the actual content of the training. For movement, the students just imitate the teacher. That's all you can do. But the teacher might change movements based on the abilities of the student. And I just want to really quickly give an example, and this is from the play Yu Tang Chun, the character Pi Shi. There were 2 people playing Pi Shi, and they had very different temperaments. So Xiao Mei Lao Shi created different movement and actually different vocal qualities for the 2 of them also, so that they ended up one of them being one character role type and the other being another role type with different movements, different voices. It was fascinating to watch her do that. She could never have done that in China. She's in the Mei Lang Fang style, and it has to, stay within that frame. But here she was free and she could just do that. And she was so happy with that. She just loved that. I've heard her talk about that particular thing, I don't know, 24 times in China when she gets the chance to talk. The text, the actual text in this performance, including the movement, the students learn it in Chinese, imitating the teacher, and then they have to put it into English. For song, of course, the teachers compose it. You can't possibly teach the language of jingju to the extent that the students can compose in it themselves in a few months. Yeah, that's not possible. So what the students then have to do after they have learned it in Chinese is take the English translation and fit it syllable by syllable. Now, when I translate it, I try to have it fit syllable by syllable, but as they learn it from their teacher and as they work with their teacher to fit it, it may or may not fit the way they like it, the student and or the teacher. So it may come back to me again and I have to retranslate it. They may come back to me with a suggestion for a different translation. There's a lot of revision that happens as that goes along. For speech, that's where we were able to give the students a lot more creative authority. And the way we gave it developed over time. You cannot simply take the tones of the Chinese, which I've already talked about as denoting meaning, right? You cannot simply take the tones of the Chinese and then fit the English into those tones. What you get is a strange sing-songy thing, which in this day and age, of course, we would label as Orientalism, yeah? But it's also rather incomprehensible as English because you're not interpreting it in the way that you would interpret English. What you do instead is to take the line as an English line and interpret it as an English line where, when you interpret it, where are your stresses? Where are your tones in English? And then you need to use the jingju patterns of methods of stylization to stress those places, and then you will have a genuine line of English jingju. Yeah.
Could you give me an illustration because I'm lost?
Okay. The simplest one I have is I am not. 我不是.
Okay.
Okay. 我不是 in Mandarin Chinese, 我不是. But if I put that into jingju, it would sound sort of like 我不是. So I've stressed it in jingju stylization. Give me a circumstance.
You're a cad. You've stolen the kingdom and you've got the jewels in your pocket. You're a fraud and a cheat.
I am
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the teachers were the final arbiters of what sounded good. Because it sounded good if they thought it sounded like jingju. It didn't matter if I, as the director, thought, oh, that was great, right? If to them it didn't sound like jingju, it got changed until they thought it sounded like jingju. And like I mentioned before, it often required retranslation. So it was really, the whole thing, a fascinating interpretive and aesthetic process. The Mei style artist from China, Jingju company, and one of her colleagues came for the first one rather than Xiaomei Laoshi because it was the first such U.S.-China cultural exchange, and the Chinese Ministry of Culture insisted on a national level artist. And Xiaomei Laoshi and I cried over the telephone and decided, yeah, well, you should go ahead with it. It's an important thing to do. So She did not come the first time, but she came the second through the fourth times, and then 9/11 happened, and the Jiangsu Province Department of Culture said, no, you are our treasure. We don't want you going to that dangerous country. So for the last 5 times, her students and colleagues came instead. But we met with her beforehand and picked the plays with her and wrote them and composed them and actually had a great deal of fun doing that. There's a lot of fun that happens in China too. And then in 2006, I managed to get her an honorary doctorate. So she came in 2006. So that was very, very, very happy about that.
You do reflections.
Yes, 40 years, because I hadn't really done that, of collaboration. So first of all, me learning, then 9 training programs, 10 plays, 3 tours of China, and getting to hear on those tours of China people telling my students that I'm China's favorite foreign concubine. These things are the most in-depth and meaningful collaborative creation I've ever experienced, as also the most fun. Really, really, a whole lot of fun. I came to have this general principle, which is change as little as possible in the traditional approach, and as much as necessary. As little as possible and as much as necessary. So then of course, there's the question, did this cultural immersion, the cultural immersion of these programs, make a meaningful difference? The students that I hear from decades later have indicated that it did make a difference. And there's one student that I just want to mention because he isn't here, he's not in Hawaii. He was in the very first one. His name is Blair Fell. And a few years ago, he published a novel called The Sign for Home. Sign as in, signing language, ALS, and it's cross-cultural, hearing and sighted, non-hearing and non-sighted. It's a very good novel. And the way he handles all of those cross-cultural experiences, well, he also told me that that he is grateful to this experience. And I would say that all students over the years agree on one thing: cross-cultural compassion is a lot of work. But it's a goal I hope we'll all continue to pursue in every place and way we can. Thank you.
Elizabeth WICHMANN WALCZAK! A hero! Let's have another hand for Elizabeth.